So the Ring of Fire is an area of northern Ontario which houses significant critical minerals, so lithium, chrome, that type of thing. And it hasn't been developed because it's quite remote, and it needs a road. And roads, as you know, are hard to build and very expensive. That means that there's been a lot of focus on the Ring of Fire in the past 20 years, but in order to develop it, we need significant investment from the province. Now, in the last budget that Ford tabled, his government tabled, they did have a considerable amount of money for the development of infrastructure required to access the Ring of Fire, which is fantastic. The government of the United States clearly sees the potential to secure the Ring of Fire, which is in Ontario, which is what? I mean, it's north, so let's just call it 20 hours north of their border, but has a very, very good opportunity to secure raw materials that it'll need to develop its cell phones, defense networks, all those chips. But we need still to do all of the consultation. We need to do all of for the road, not only for the road, which the province has said that it will support, but also for the development. There are many First Nations which are in Indigenous communities, which are located there in remote areas. And it needs to be a massive conversation, which is starting to happen now. So it really could help with regards to having a source of all those critical minerals in North America, and it could be a great resource. It's just going to take a lot of time and energy for this development. That's a good question. I am not a demand forecast or supply forecast expert. I will say that Canada is not #1 on production of lithium. For instance, there's some South American countries that are on that list, and we still need to find some lithium, frankly, and to be able to develop it. We have a few projects, but we're not leaders. There is still a lot of exploration going on in the Ring of Fire, and we could get there, but we are certainly a player in nickel. We have copper, but we need to step it up. We have had a very, I would say we haven't spent enough on exploration miles in the last 10 years in order to stay where we could. I mean, I'm very sure that it's there. We've spent a lot of money historically on exploration in Canada, but we have, because of the market conditions and because of all of the reasons why I've talked about the systemic challenges, we haven't necessarily been focused on that. Or we haven't in the past 10 years had a market where exploration is rewarded. We are starting to see the renaissance in exploration for sure. What will need to happen is we'll need to focus on certain minerals and metals. I don't think we are going to be the leader in lithium production. Indonesia is high on nickel production because they have the nickel laterite, but we'll get there. I mean, certainly Sudbury still has such a plentiful resource there. It's expensive to mine it because it's underground and it's deep, but with regards to where we need to get to, all of these companies are looking to, okay, how can we contribute to making sure that we have mined out our resources? And if there's ones that we need to get to that we have historically put off because they haven't been economic, guess what? Chances are they're probably economic at the prices that we're going to need. So it remains to be seen. It's TBD, but if we really focus on this, can play a pivotal role. Now, having said that, this is Canada, but our public companies probably can have a massive percentage of operating those mines worldwide, because the public company here will own the mine, say in a developing country or in a different country where they're operating. So Canadians have their tentacles operating mines around the world and developing mines around the world. And that's what we'd like to see, is that the public companies that are located here on the stock exchanges in Toronto and on the Venture, or others, now there's other ones they can list on, are really focusing on our innovation and our safety policies and our human rights policies around the world. say this is something you need to ask the candidates for our next federal election. Please, that question exactly. Ask every candidate, ask your MP, how are we going to do that? How does your party, does it have a policy? Does it have a vision, frankly? How do we do that? We talk. I'm just going back to that. We need to actually say, hi, this is Canada. We have one of the largest countries in the world. We need to get from east to west. We have to bring our resources that we have in Alberta on the rail to the port. We need to get them in a pipeline. Saguenay, Quebec had a massive LNG project denied it is just hit after hit after hit to the resource sector that we have taken. Okay, so we have to admit that. We have to say, yes, agreed. We couldn't, and maybe we won't. I mean, what I'm here to say is I'm positive and I'm hopeful that because we need to save the planet, we have to. We've got no other choice. We can't just put our head in the sand and say we don't need resources. We absolutely need resources. And in order to lower our emissions, we should be using natural gas for the next couple of decades while we produce the amounts of nickel and all of the lithium and everything we're going to need for massive storage capacity for our solar panels and our wind and everything where we're producing, where we have to replace non-clean generated energy. So yeah, it's hard. There are so many hurdles now, and not, in my opinion, a lot of vision that is going into, okay, we need this because 30 years from now, this is where we want to be. We need to get to have a country where we're planning 30 years for infrastructure, 30 years for energy delivery, and we're working in that. And we're going to have to make some trade-offs. We're going to have to say, for now, providing LNG to the world is better than them refiring coal-fired plants in Germany. I mean, they have to restart coal. It doesn't align. So those conversations we need, and we as you and me and our colleagues and our friends need to be able to say, this is Canada. We are resource-based. We need to understand why. Why can't we do this? We should be able to do this, and we should be able to do it right. So what are the challenges? What are you scared of? Let's answer that. Let's study that. Let's figure it out. We've got innovation. We've got lots of people who are free now from Google that maybe could come over and try to figure out how and why we can have a safe terminal in Saguenay. So it's a hopeful answer that I'm optimistic, but it's a problem, and it's been a problem, and that's the trend, which I hope to buck, which I hope we start to change. Starting to change. The tone is starting to change, so it's a good opportunity. It's a good opportunity to say, by the way, your constituents, assuming that the Liberals, if they, assuming nothing, we don't assume it's election, but if the current party, if you had tomorrow to chat with them, I would say, I'm pleased that the tone has changed. What do we need to do in order to get the policy to match with the tone? And how can we help? Because what will help is that they understand that their constituents support, right? Just the way politics works is that if you don't think you're going to get support from the people who live in the country, then your policy, you're not going to adopt that policy. But if people in the country support clean metals and support a clean energy transition, then guess what? We should be able to do it responsibly and sustainable. So I think we're all there. Just think once again, we need to chat. And COVID, we kind of all stopped chatting, didn't we? We need exploration, and we need to know, we need a policy oversight. We need champions within the governments to say, these are the rules. If you follow the rules, there will be a certainty for permitting. So right now you can follow all the rules, which are really hard, by the way, really hard to meet. You can follow all the rules, get to the end, and then say, no, there was some, no. And then what do you mean? Like, no, you just spent $300 million on exploration, $300 million of investors' money that now is out there waiting for what? Waiting for a policy change, waiting for something to change from your environmental study, waiting for something to change in your technical study. Something needs to change clearly in order for a permit to be issued. I would like to see an environment where we know we work with First Nations and Indigenous groups, and we know what the consultation is such that is required. We know the free informed prior consent. We know what we have to do. You can't do it properly if nobody's agreed what has to happen. It needs to be absolutely transparent. It needs to happen. Indigenous peoples have a right to say what happens on their lands. If future projects are on their lands, we need to work together. I mean, that is just like nice 101, right? You can't go into somebody's land and work without asking them, how do we work together? Is this something that you want? We have to do that. Governments have been told they need to oversee this process. Without that happening, we won't be able to move forward. It needs to happen. And we need to do it today. We need to figure it out. We need to have the conversation. We need to have the hard conversations. People have been saying this for 20 years. I'm sorry, is that you? Are you seeing the in and out? Anyway, so that needs to happen. It needs to happen tomorrow or 5 years ago. And then the other thing that needs to happen is that we need to have investors have a way to make money. People aren't going to finance these mines if there is no path to profit or to increase in their equity. And that just is back to policy. Permits are denied after all these years, that type of thing. So if we can fix that and we can actually see that there's a path towards permitting that the governments are willing to invest in, then maybe we'll bring back the investments, or we'll just have private investments. Private investors making private mines. The car companies will own a nickel mine, a lithium mine, et cetera. But there's definitely going to be a change in where finance comes from. I would say every country has the same social and geopolitical risk. I mean, if you'd said to Baffinland they would be denied for an extension 4 years ago, what would they have said? No, it's Canada. We have good support. We have good, right? I think that it can happen any day. It can change on a dime. What I would say is the countries where they're familiar with mining, maybe there's a more clearly defined path, right? You start with your programs, you start with your social programs, et cetera. Where we're going now is that it's not a company-led process. It's really a community-led process. What does the community want? Where does it want you to invest? And when? Now it's starting to go right back to the cycle, right? So you used to go in, you used to do your early exploration work, your IP, your soil sampling, that type of thing, and then you progress to drilling, and you still didn't know if there was even a deposit there. Now, when you do that is when communities are expecting an environmental study, some investment in the community, and exactly who bears the cost of expensive programs at that point when you haven't even determined whether or not there is even a good target on the project. This is why there's a lack of projects that are in the pipeline, because those that were discovered long ago still aren't built, and the impediments to exploration are huge in every region, frankly. I mean, certainly the developed ones, maybe it's easier to explore without major social cost or ESG cost, but you can appreciate that both sides have a responsibility here. If you're going to go into an area that doesn't have historic exploration and you're going to upend people's lives and you're going to explain to them what what they need, there needs to be a benefit there. Well, who pays for it? Is the junior development company, or is the government? If the government needs the metals, then perhaps there's some. So this goes back to that alternative form of financing, because investors are no longer wanting to invest in that early cost of exploration without a sight line to something that 10 years from now, 13 years from now, as the person who wrote the question, there's no return. It's a 13-year process for a development. And look, I mean, investors have a much shorter timeline for investment than 13 years. It's a conversation which needs to happen. Who bears the cost? The cost is real and should be there. I'm not suggesting we don't spend it. I just suggest that there has to be the end user, i.e. you and me, are going to pay more and should pay more for our good, our phone, so that the exploration for the metals that go into this phone are paid for by Apple and Apple consumers, not just the investor of XYZ Lithium. We need to figure that out. So Apple, XYZ or Z, whatever, depends on what country you're in, but XYZ here, lithium. And that needs to happen, because otherwise we won't be investing. We won't have the capital, in my opinion. This is all my opinion. So my overarching hope is that mining is not political, that you don't ever have to worry about a party or it's just a matter of doing it right, and recycle. If you want to invest in things, invest in recycling. Let's utilize the minerals that we take out of the ground again and again and again, because there's only so many of them.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, it's so important. So many great ways to harvest those resources and use them to their full extent.
Yeah, well, thank you. And keep up the good work. Keep up the dialogue. It's people like you who are going to ensure that Canada stays the great nation that it is and returns to be able to its spot in the global leader of the resource economy.
Well, we so appreciate having you on today, and we appreciate your feedback. So it makes us feel really good too.
All right, take care.
Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday.
Yeah, my pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye.